Hi class, welcome to the second lecture in neuroanatomy. This is the large-scale structures of the nervous system. Our learning objectives for this lecture are to identify the major divisions of the nervous system, including the peripheral and the central nervous systems. We'll then describe the major structures of the brain, including both structure and function, and then finally end off by identifying major divisions of the brain, the cortex, the midbrain, and the brainstem. The nervous system can be broken into two broad systems. First, the central nervous system, which consists of the brain and the spinal cord, here depicted in figure A in blue. And there's an image of an actual brain connected to the spinal cord. So that would be the central nervous system showing up in B. The second part of the nervous system is the peripheral nervous system. Now, the peripheral nervous system is everything else that's not the brain and the spinal cord. So the central nervous system is in the center of the body, going down the longitudinal axis, whereas the peripheral nervous system is everything else in the periphery. You'll notice that the peripheral nervous system consists of all of the nerve fibers that are going out into the body itself. So again, two broad divisions of the nervous system. We'll often abbreviate these. So the central nervous system, you may hear called the CNS, the central nervous system, and the peripheral nervous system, the PNS. But they have different functions, and we'll describe those. Let's look first at the peripheral nervous system, and then we'll go to the central nervous system a little bit later. All of those things coming off of the spinal cord here in yellow are nerves, or bundles of axons. You may have heard of a nerve in our earlier lecture when we discussed the components of a neuron. We saw a long process coming off of the cell body called an axon. What a nerve is a collection of axon fibers. So a single nerve will contain hundreds or thousands of individual axons that are all bound together, leaving the spinal cord at certain intervals and going out into the periphery. Now those nerves can be one of two types. Remember, we have motor nerves, which are collections of motor neuron axons, so they're the main output, and sensory nerves, which convey information from the body to the CNS. The peripheral nervous system can also be further divided into two distinct systems. So do this little demonstration with me. Go ahead and raise your right hand. Okay. Go ahead and clench your fist and open it back up. Okay, not too hard. Now go ahead and dilate your pupils. Anyone? What about slow your heart rate down? Could you just stop digesting food at this moment? No. Okay. It turns out that things that are under voluntary control and things that are not under our voluntary control, at least in terms of muscle movements, are controlled by two different aspects of the peripheral nervous system. The somatic nervous system, soma means body, are the system that controls our voluntary muscles. These nerves interconnect the brain and the major muscles and sensory systems of the body. And they're under voluntary control. The autonomic nervous system is that part of the nervous system that controls internal organs and the viscera, and also some muscle fibers that are associated with that. Just digesting, you are contracting certain muscles, and also dilation or constriction of the pupils involves contraction of certain muscles that are not under voluntary control, and that's controlled by the autonomic nervous system. So again, two components of the peripheral nervous system. The somatic nervous system controls voluntary muscle movement, and sensory input, and the autonomic nervous system connecting to the internal organs. There are different types of nerves that are part of the peripheral nervous system. First are the cranial nerves. Now, as the name implies, these are nerves that emerge from the surface of the brain. Cranium is brain. So the cranial nerves come off of the brain or the brainstem and innervate the head, the neck, and visceral organs directly from the brain itself. The other group of nerves are called spinal nerves. And again, as their name implies, these are nerves that emerge directly from the spinal cord. Let's take a look at the cranial nerves. There are 12 pairs of cranial nerves. And what we're looking at here is the underside of a brain. So this is kind of the nose side, the rostral side. You can see the cerebellum here. This is the brainstem. But these cranial nerves emerge from different parts of the brain itself. They have individual names, associated numbers, 1 through 12, and they control different functions. Let's look at some of these cranial nerves. So 3 of the cranial nerves are exclusively sensory. They are the olfactory nerve, which is here, coming up. Can you think about what the olfactory nerve may be involved in? Processing smell, olfaction. Cranial nerve 2 is the optic nerve. The optic nerve is involved in vision. So the optic nerve is coming off down here. And then cranial nerve 8 is the vestibulocochlear nerve. Vestibular sense is a sense of balance. The cochlea is that organ in your ear, so hearing and balance are involved in cranial nerve 8. Now cranial nerve 8 is way down here, attaching there. So these 3 cranial nerves are exclusively sensory information. So sense of smell, vision, hearing, and balance. There are 5 that are exclusively motor pathways. There is cranial nerve 3, the ocular motor nerve. The ocular motor nerve is involved in eye movements. The trochlear nerve is also involved in eye movements. The trochlear nerve helps your eyes deflect in one direction. The abducens nerve, again, eye movements. Why might we have so many different nerves controlling eye movements? Turns out humans use a lot of visual information, and so having good control of our eyes seems to be something that the brain is willing to spend a lot of energy and resources on. 2 other motor pathways are the spinal accessory nerve, cranial nerve 11, which involves neck muscles, and the cranial nerve 12, hypoglossal. Hypo is under and glossal is tongue, so the hypoglossal is involved in tongue movements. Four of the cranial nerves have both sensory and motor functions. The trigeminal nerve, which is the largest nerve that we can see. Were we doing sheep brain dissections, that would probably be the easiest one for us to identify. The facial nerve, which is involved in both taste sensation and facial muscles. The glossopharyngeal nerve, throat sensation muscles, and the vagus nerve, which innervates the heart, liver, and intestines coming down. Now, usually what we would want to do is memorize all 12 cranial nerves, and in part of the Canvas activities, I provide you with some mnemonics on how to go about and do that. So I would look into those. What about the other types of nerves that we have? The spinal nerves. Now the spinal nerves are those nerves that are going to come off of the spinal cord, And the spinal cord has different areas: the cervical or neck area, thoracic, the lumbar, and the sacral. And the nerves are named after what area they come off of. Usually C1 would be cervical nerve 1, T1, L1, or whatever it happens to be. The spinal nerve 1, a group of motor fibers that project from the spinal cord, and 2, a group of sensory fibers that enter the spinal cord. And I'll show you images of that so we can get a better understanding of the motor outputs and the sensory inputs.